Good evening, welcome. Spirituality is very, very simple. Unfortunately, the way it's promulgated and the way it's popularized within various traditions makes it seem hopelessly complex and including all kinds of various elements. One's supposed to, that maybe in certain traditions one's supposed to learn different languages or learn how to chant in Sanskrit or learn this or learn that or get one's name changed to some foreign name and so on and so forth. All of which can be great fun. I mean, why not? It sounds like a great way to pass the time. But unfortunately, it has absolutely nothing to do with what spirituality actually is. Spirituality is very simple. The question that spirituality asks is, what is this that's here? Just what is it? Here it is, right? It's not like something long ago and far away you have to get to. It's right here already. So what is this that's here? That's the fundamental question that spirituality poses. And of course, answering that question is achieving spiritual realization, is achieving the spiritual solution. So it's very simple. It's more like physics than it is like, all of these complex social traditions that it's often couched in. It's like, well, here's this actuality. What is it? What's going on here? What is it? How does it work? What's it made of? What's it consist of? So it's very simple, direct, objectively oriented question, investigation. And it turns out that investigating this is very simple because here it is. So investigate away, look at it. Here it is. What is it that's here? What is your experience? The reason why it is so difficult and so elusive, seemingly, is that the way consciousness seems to work, the way the human mind seems to work, and so on and so forth, seems to present itself with a faculty of imaginative interpretation. So, the consciousness generates essentially theories, or generates essentially hypotheses about what might be going on. So here's this. So you're born, right? You're born and it's just like, wow! Here it is. Here's your experience, right? Just like bang, the whole schmear, just like bang, right here in your face, right? Still, it hasn't changed, right? That's still what it is. It never stopped being that, never started becoming anything else. But because of the way consciousness seems to be able to work, it has the facility for erecting all these hypotheses and interpretations and all of this about, well, maybe this is a world out here, and maybe I'm somehow in here separate from this world. Maybe the objective world exists. Maybe it doesn't know an objective world exists. It's just bang, just a single presence of experiential field, right? Maybe this other shape that seems to be showing up, doing whatever it's doing, is another me, and maybe it's my mother, maybe it's my father, maybe it's another human being, maybe I'm a human being, maybe this is my body, maybe I'm in here, and maybe I'm not out there, and so on and so forth. So we're all very familiar with typical consensus reality theories of what's going on. And of course, there is no actual consensus. Everyone has their own pet versions, and some of them are pretty far afield in terms of if you know any wacko, hollow Earth people or UFO people or what have you. No offense to anyone here intended, by all means. It's all viable. Why not? So anyway, consciousness seems to more or less naturally, certainly fairly easily, generate or be seduced into this erecting of hypothetical interpretations, essentially in imagination. The problem comes in that psychology, human consciousness, also seems to have the property to to fall into belief, to fall into forgetting that a hypothesis is simply a hypothesis in imagination, and falling into a condition of holding it to be objectively true. And then forgetting that it's fallen into that. So it just, all of a sudden it is true. There is an objective world. There are other people. I am stuck in this body. I was born and I will die. When I die, I will either cease to exist or go to heaven or become, whatever, fill in the blank, whatever your personal belief system is. And all this stuff is more or less held to be objectively true in essentially the same sense as the fact of one's experiential real-time information is held to be objectively true. So in short, the consciousness can lose the ability to discriminate between fantasy and reality. Now, a shorthand term for this is being nuts, being cuckoo. I mean, someone that's in a loony bin and thinks they're Jesus Christ, they think they're Jesus Christ. They are Jesus Christ. It's like, why are you telling me I'm not Christ? Why do you have me locked up here? I'm Jesus. I have important stuff to do, right? I have to go out and loaves and fishes and stuff, whatever. But, so, when one loses the ability to distinguish between imagination and actuality, I would qualify that as insanity, being crazy, being nuts, being cuckoo. And this, unfortunately, or I should say interestingly, seems to be the human norm. For reasons that are inconceivable and seem to be inherent, more or less everyone, statistically, has been seduced into holding certain things to be objectively true that in fact are hypotheses, in fact are possible interpretations that are being held in imagination. And because of this murkiness of being able to distinguish between the two, it's confusing as hell. Because you're looking at your experience and you're also looking at what you're holding it to be, and you're thinking it's one and the same. So you're thinking it is that. So this presents a problem. This presents a real conundrum. How do you distinguish? How do you reverse engineer? If I'm a complete crazy person, wait a minute, I always thought I was Jesus Christ. Or more to the point, I always thought I was Peter Brown. So if this is a complete fantasy, if this is a complete hypothesis, how do I distinguish? How do I draw the line? How do you reverse engineer to get to be able to sort out, to differentiate between imagination and objective reality? And of course, not surprisingly, it turns out that this is the essence of spiritual practice. The essence of spiritual practice is coming to distinguish, or so I should say learning or training oneself or stumbling upon the ability to distinguish between imagination and actuality. Now, imagination is not evil. Imagination is great. There's no problem with imagination. The problem with imagination is not knowing it's imagination. If you think it's real, and if you're susceptible, if you're gullible, and you think that imagination is actual, then you're just a patsy for every politician and car salesman, politician out there who starts promising, selling you all these things like, oh, great, that's wonderful, my life is going to be better if I stockpile guns, that's fabulous, or whatever, right? Whatever
selling a dream.
Yeah, selling a dream, and not being able to distinguish that it is a dream. It's a pretty fantasy. Hey, pretty fantasies are wonderful. I'm all for them, but it's just fantasies are just fantasy. And if you're unable to distinguish between imagination and objective reality, you're essentially nuts. You're cuckoo. Which again is fine, because that seems to be the sort of normal condition of most human beings these days. So we're all very familiar with that. But if you're for some reason, for some quirky and very peculiar reason, you're drawn to this kind of spiritual investigation, all of a sudden this stuff becomes much more relevant. All of a sudden this issue becomes much more to the point. Oh, that's interesting. maybe the way I'm holding this to be, it's not actually like that, you know. And so all of a sudden, one is faced with this koan, with this conundrum, with this riddle. Well, what do you do with that? How do you sort it out? Well, fortunately, there are easy ways. They're not necessarily easy in terms of putting them into practice effectively, but they're easy in terms of being simple and not particularly elaborate. It turns out that actuality, objective reality, has certain characteristics which are not shared by imagination. And one can take advantage of this fact to differentiate between actuality and fantasy, and delusion, as a technical spiritual term. Chief among these is that actuality is unresolvable. You can't tell precisely what anything actually is. You can't get to its actual, complete, precise value. Whereas in imagination, you can. You know, black is black and white is white. Everyone knows that. Black isn't white and white isn't black. If black was white, they'd call it white, right? So black is black and white is white. It's all imaginary. When you go looking in the real world, you don't find any actual black. You don't find any actual white. It's all these weird shades of gray. And exactly which shade of gray? Well, you can't really tell because it's sort of a little bit lighter than that shade and a little bit darker than that shade, but then you look closer, and you can never pin it down. You can never get to the bottom of precisely what any objective experience actually is. Which isn't to say it isn't what it is, but it's infinite. The closer you look at it, the more information you gather about it, but that information does not cohere into a simple whole. You know, the fantasy, the naive fantasy is, well, the more you study something, the more precisely you're going to be able to pin down what it is, right? I mean, this just makes sense, right? You look, here's a cup, right? So you look at the cup, and the more you look at the cup, you know, the more you're going to know about it. But you could spend the rest of your life looking at this cup, and every instant you would experience it completely uniquely, never repeating any way you had ever experienced it previously. And you could spend the next lifetime and the next lifetime and the next lifetime doing the same thing with the same stupid, boring cup, and still you would never have a repeating, identical experience. So which experience is the cup? Which one is the cup? Which one is what it is? You know, the fantasy is, well, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to look at it, and the more I study it, the more it's going to get the same. But it doesn't do that. Actual experience doesn't actually do that. It continues to diverge. It continues to be different in itself without end, without reaching a point where that stops happening. So this is one very simple principle that one can use to differentiate within one's experience between actuality and fantasy, actuality and imagination, actuality and interpretation, thought, hypothesis. And there's so many examples. I mean, everyone knows that space is space. Here's space, right? This is it. It's really space. It's really right here. And time is time. It's really time. It's really right here. It's Tuesday at, 7:44 and blah, blah, blah. And it's exactly that, and it's not, but is it really? Go looking at space, Check out what space is as an experiential actuality, and you will not be able to find what space is. You'll get no final version of space. You close your eyes and space disappears, becomes something completely different. You fall asleep and space becomes something entirely different. You start dreaming and all of a sudden there's a new space maybe, right? And it's entirely different. So what space? Which one's space? So spatiality is an apparent property which can seem to appear within experience, but exactly what it is unresolvable. It's imprecise. It's all kind of innuendo. And if you don't look too closely at it, the less closely you look at it, the more it seems to be obvious and static and stable. But when you look really closely at what is space, again, or what is dimension? What is length, height, breadth? This room is 25 feet, blah, blah, blah. Okay, right, and that's objective, and right. You can take a ruler and hold it up and you find that. But how big is the ruler? Well, you get closer to it, it gets bigger. You get farther from it, it gets littler. So which one of those is the actual ruler? You know? Oh, but that's just sophistry. That's just argument. The ruler is the ruler. It's right there, it's sitting there. It's not changing. You can't find a ruler that's sitting there that doesn't change. Such a ruler does not exist. Rulers exist only in experience, and the experience of rulers is always a one-off. A one-off, a unique event. So I can take the ruler and hold it right here, and how big is it? Well, it's big as the whole universe. I can't see anything but the ruler. I can take the ruler and put it in a rocket ship and send it out around the orbit of the moon, and how big is it? You can't even see it at all. It's non-existent. So, which one of those is the ruler? You know. Oh, but the ruler exists objectively. Show me an objective ruler. You can only find rulers in experience. So which brings you back again to, okay, cool, what is experience? And great. So you're back to investigating what's actual instead of what's conceptual. So a stable ruler that's exactly 12 inches, and it's always 12 inches, and it doesn't change, and it's precisely the same, is obviously a fantasy. Because, in fact, the experience of rulers is just a big question mark. Right? It's a big, it's anybody's guess exactly what it is. You can engage with it all you want. I mean, you can get rulers, and you can look at them, and you can look at them close and look at them far, and you can do all that stuff. But you will find the same thing. You will ultimately find that investigating what a ruler is ultimately investigating what experience is. Because there is no ruler outside of experience. The idea that there's a ruler outside of experience is an idea that exists only in experience. Right? So you have the idea that there's a ruler and it's just sitting there and it's a ruler and it is what it is and it's not changing. But you have that idea in your experience. Try and find that idea outside your experience. And how could that happen? So again, this brings you back in the investigation to, well, okay, interesting. This sort of the question becomes, what is experience? And good, finally, starting to ask the right question. Experience is the only actuality that can be found. I'm saying that, I'm claiming that, I'm asserting that. Check it out for yourself. Try and find anything else. Where are you going to look for it? Where are you going to look for something outside your experience?
I think it's in the yellow page.
So great. So when you start to ask that question, well, what is experience? I mean, what is it really? Not what is it? Let me go to the neurophysiologist and look up how brain chemistry. It's like those are all ideas that exist in someone's experience. What is the experience that these ideas exist in? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the neurophysiology come first, or did the experience come first that enabled the scientists to do the investigation, to do the measurements, to come up with all of this jargon and bullshit and details and data, and then they can spout, great volumes of information about neurophysiology and neurochemistry and all that, which is all great, but all they're studying is aspects of experience. Nerves don't exist. Nerves are a hypothesis of aspects of experience. Rulers are a hypothesis of aspects of experience. Space is a hypothesis of aspects of experience. So the real interesting question is, what is experience? And this, when you start asking that question, then you're practicing actual spirituality. Because that's the question. What is this that's here? And when you look carefully, you will ultimately discover you can't find anything here but the field of your experience. You don't know my experience exists. That's a hypothesis. You can imagine it. It may well. I don't know any of you exist. Right? I could be dreaming this. This could be a vision. How could I tell? I can hypothesize that you exist. And that's fine, but I can't know it because all I can find is my own experiential field, which is the sole experiential field as far as I can tell. And if you actually exist, then I suppose your experiential field is the sole experiential field that exists. But that's your problem. My problem is this one, which is the sole one that exists. So since the sole one that exists, it's the only one I have to worry about. And yet I seem to like to be here talking about this stuff. So.
Ask a question for you.
Well, just a second. Let me see if I'm done. That's pretty thorough. So anyway, when you strip away all of the, tribalism and social trappings and interpersonal trappings, spirituality boils down to the question, what is it that is here? What is actual? What is real? And surprisingly enough, you already know. But also surprisingly enough, probably, you may not be letting yourself know because you've been twisted in such heavy-handed knots by your brainwashing and the brainwashing of the structure of language, the brainwashing of the structure of education and semantic confusion, the brainwashing of interpersonal intense emotionality, all of these various complex energy constructs, which have appeared solely within your experiential field, of course, because where else could they appear? But anyway, all of these apparent complexities, chasing after them and trying to make sense of them and tie a bow around them and dot the T's and cross the I's or whatever, typically makes it, even though the fact that you know your own experience very intimately and you in fact know nothing else, you're an expert on it, you're totally immersed in it. And yet, typically, if you're like most people, you don't have much of a clue about what it actually is because you've been so seduced into all this confusion. And so disentangling that, or actually just, let's just say, getting out from under that, is the essential spiritual task. It turns out, fortunately, you don't actually even need to stop it. You don't need to become sane. You don't need to stop having your head, having been put through an egg beater. You don't need to, deconstruct all that stuff. You just need to recognize that it is that. Like, oh, I'm a crazy person, and there's all these incredible thoughts and beliefs and everything floating around in the experiential field, and isn't that interesting? And just in that recognition, you're free of it without needing to stop it or block it or make sense of it or anything, which is very fortunate, for those of us that are lazy, which I am. I'll nominate myself as the chief of that club. So anyway, that's sort of one way of presenting what I have to present, and I will be quite glad to discuss any aspect of that with you all.
If I'm understanding what you're saying, the experience continues to be...
Excuse me just a second. Lily, would you turn off that fan? It's a little noisy and kind of unnecessary.
Fantasy, black and white, is totally resolved. The experiential field continues to have layers to it.
Yeah, forever. The closer you look, the more you find out, and you never hit bottom.
Yeah. And I'm thinking the idea of the ruler, in terms of, I don't know, all the histories of measurement, but it seems to me like maybe to measure this room, initially they might have taken a string, and they would have measured it with a string. And then they would have come up with the idea of a ruler, an inch, and then they would have come up with the next resolvable measuring device, the laser. And then beyond that, something else that continues to make the length of the room more and more precise.
Right. Within those terms.
Within those terms. Is each of those precisions a fantasy? Because there's one
No,
more
as relative precision, it's definitely relatively more precise, but it's not. But the question is, what is it absolutely, not what it is relatively.
So it continues to be able to be broken into finer and
so
finer.
you measure the dimensions of this room with a laser with incredible precision, right? And then you go to sleep, Where'd the laser go? Where'd the room go? Where'd your measurements go? You die. Where'd they go? How big is the room when you're dead? How big is the room when you've never been born? You know, and it's just as big then as it is now, although it may look very different.
Yeah, the ceiling is getting closer as I grow up.
Yeah. Or you dream of a room, and it's a very vivid dream. You're dreaming the room very precisely, very sharply. The room's right there, and you're in it. And my God, this is like, you know, it's realer than this, right? How big is that room? And when you wake up, how big is the room? Before you ever dreamt of that room, how big is it? You know, because the room didn't get created when you dreamed of it. It only appears. It never was created. It's not actually there. It seems to be there. It is an appearance. You know, and again, you know, the nature of appearance is another aspect of this investigation of experiences.
The other part of it that I was thinking about is, and I got very angry at the optometrist that said this to me. When I was about 20 or 25, he told me that when I turned 40, I would need glasses. And I got very angry at him, because how should he know this? You know, how should he be able to predict this of me when I wear glasses? It seems to me that as I age, there's this softening of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of that truly different, or I mean, my
Different
perception
from what?
different from when I was younger, or
You can't know.
yeah, because you can't exist in both times at the same time.
Can't know.
Because
And what does softer mean?
well, that's where I'm getting to. You know, if I'm wearing glasses and I see you more sharply,
Mm-hmm.
is that any more real?
No,
It's just
it's not more real.
Yeah,
It's
more
just
gratifying?
sharper.
maybe more gratifying than just seeing
Well,
you as a blob.
gratifying is a way of qualifying it, and that's completely arbitrary. Right?
It gets into likes and dislikes.
Yeah, well, all of which is great. I mean, by all means, if you like sharpness, or if you or if you like fuzziness, you know, which some people may, have at it. But fuzziness is real fuzziness, and sharpness is real sharpness, and the fuzziness is not any less real than the sharpness. I mean, let's suppose you have a delirium. Let's suppose you have a really high fever, or you're really stoned, or someone dosed you with LSD, or something, who knows what, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like totally out of it. I mean, the sensorium is just smeared and clobbered, right? But it really is that. That's real. That's what reality is in that moment, as far as you know.
For me.
Yeah, of course, for you. But what else is there but for you,
Right.
as far as you can tell?
But that's my third thing, and that is, if somebody like Chrysler is on a street
Mm-hmm.
and he looks at the Chrysler building and he says, "That's my building,"
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't know that he's Chrysler, then you think he's crazy.
Right.
But he could actually have the deed in a safe deposit box.
Sure. Well, what you think is irrelevant, because that's just more craziness.
But what I'm getting to is craziness is really, it's a judgment, correct?
Yes. Well, craziness is a judgment in terms of someone else. Craziness is an assessment in terms of oneself.
Yeah.
If you're doing it accurately. If you're not doing it accurately, then it's just a belief. Oh, you're nuts. I'm nuts. I'm sane. What does that mean? I'm saying I'm nuts. I am. You know, do I incorporate elements that could be called nuts? Sure, why not? You know, I'll give you that. Do I incorporate elements that could be called sane? Sure, why not? You know, Chrysler owns the Chrysler building, but does the cell in this particular cell in this particular joint of his left thumb own the Chrysler building? You know, does the quarks that particular atom in that particular cell is own? Owning the Chrysler building or not owning the Chrysler building is a very particularized game structure related to pieces of paper and social agreements and legalities, which again is it's like, I won Monopoly against my brothers when I was 12 years old. That's just like saying, I own the Chrysler Building. Maybe so, but so what? All that's indicating is a certain claim of historical game activity, which is extremely partial within the experiential field. That I did win this particular Monopoly game, let's suppose, not that I ever actually did. That I did win this particular Monopoly game. What else was going on within my experiential field while I was playing that game and supposedly winning it? You know, the playing Monopoly and winning it is such a minuscule, minute portion of what was actually present within the experiential field at that time. It's completely absurd to even characterize it as an event. And yet it's not untrue, if it's not untrue. It's not untrue that Chrysler owns the Chrysler Building.
But it's a consensus of opinion.
Yeah, well, it's a consensus of opinion, and it's such a minute aspect of what's actually present within his experiential field as to be basically irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. Like, so what? You own the Chrysler Building, but you're also seeing that cloud. You're also feeling this itch on your butt. You're also, remembering something that you're imagining happened to you when you were a kid, and you're this, and you. I mean, look at the actual contents, the actual experiential content of the experiential field in real time. You're in an infinite field of inconceivable apparent information and density, and it's all unresolvable. And yet, in terms of our conscious narration of what's happening, what am I doing? We abstract out these tiny, tiny little threads of, I'm here in this room giving a talk. What I'm doing now is giving a talk. It's not untrue that I'm here giving a talk, but it's such a tiny slice of the pie of my experience as to be essentially irrelevant. So it's not negated, it's included. Yeah, I am giving a talk. But that's not what's happening. All human narrative, all human abstraction essentially is censorious, it's censorship. We have this inconceivably information-dense field of actuality in every instant, which is always unique, never repeating, and always completely changing, instantaneously, like with zero duration. It's not like any state of affairs is even true for like a nanosecond. It's just like utterly, it's gone. Its appearance is its going. I mean, there's no like, it's not like it rises to a peak and then sits there for a while and falls. It's like it's appearing and is a euphemism for it's disappearing. And then there's a new state of affairs which is already gone. A new state of so what's true? So what's happening? I'm sitting here giving a talk. It's like, yeah, that really encompasses a lot, doesn't it?
But you're filtering.
Yeah, it's filtering. Exactly, it's filtering. And it's very, very heavy-handed filtering. And you don't need to not do it. There's nothing wrong with filtering, but to see that it is filtering.
Is there a way to make the filter less filtering?
It doesn't matter. Just see it. You don't need to change it. Just see it. So the conscious mind does this very heavy-handed filtering and narration and interpretation of what am I doing now? I'm here. And see, my name is Peter Brown, and I live in San Rafael, and I'm here to do this. And so you have your curriculum vitae. You have your sort of list of pulling yourself together. What the fuck am I doing here? Why am I here? And so you sort of have that, just spontaneously in your consciousness, and you can remember, that's right, I came down here because I'm supposed to do a talk, so I better sit down and do a talk. Right? So you have that. You don't need to not have that. That's absolutely fine. But because that doesn't get in the way of the vast continuum that it exists in. So when you get that, a point of focus does not eliminate its context. Context is always included, and context is always drastically and vastly and inconceivably. I would use the word infinitely other than the focus, the point of focus. So all of this narration, all this interpretation and censorship, the filtering, is essentially creating a point of focus. Essentially, it's an imaginary point of focus, but that's unimportant, really. Creating a point of focus. But that point of focus doesn't negate the context. So I'm here giving a talk, but I'm also perceiving that particular exact shade of red and that particular picture of exactly this instant, and then the shade of red next to it, and the shade of red next to it. We could sit here until the end of time, making a list of every detail of what I experience in one instant, and it's already something else in the next instant, experientially, right? But you don't need to make a list, because it comes with. Here it is. You don't need to hold it. You don't need to claim it. You don't need to enumerate it. Even though as humans we feel, part of our brainwashing is psychologically is to feel an urgent need to explain ourselves, to justify ourselves. Oh, it's okay. I'm here because I'm giving a talk. Not I'm here because I just wandered in and I have no idea what the fuck is going on. Which is, probably much nearer and much more comprehensive of the truth. But again, those two aren't really mutually exclusive. It's sort of it all comes with. We're a mess. We're not coherent. We're not one thing. We're not. We're just this vast continuum, this vast smear of all of these random qualities and elements and energies and whatever. You can't pin down what they are, so it doesn't matter what you call them. That's completely unstable and constantly changing, and here you are.
Yeah,
and yet, you're here because you're you, and you're here to listen to a spiritual talk, and that's all cool, no problem. Because that's not in any way contrary to the continuum within which it exists, which is so inconceivably vastly much more than that.
There's these psychological needs that you're describing, and there's a psychological need to have a certain feeling of acceptance or be part of a group or something.
Sure.
And so you were talking about how if we really get it, we understand that the only thing I know is my experience, right? And I don't know that you exist, or if you have some sort of subjective depth or whatever, right? So if I really get that, then it seems like there's this feeling of loneliness that needs to be dealt with in order to really get past this sort of a sort of limiting belief. Right, like there's a limited belief that I need.
Yeah. Loneliness is a fantasy of limitation. You alone exist, and yet you include everything. So you are alone, but you're not limited. You're not separate. True loneliness is that I would be lonely if I was alone and everyone was out there and I was cut off from them. But when everyone is me, they're me. So I alone am here, and everyone happens to be me. So it's aloneness, but it's not a separation. It's not a limitation or a lessness. Limitation isn't the right word. Incompleteness. Maybe it's a better word. So the fantasy of aloneness that makes it seem painful is the implication of being separate from something that's actually there. But that it's actually there is a pure fantasy. And in fact, you're completely not separated from it. There's zero separation from your presence in my experience. It's not like you're over there and I'm over here and this is that. You are in my experience. How much more intimate could we be engaged? You are present in my field of vision. You're in my field of vision. You're in me, as far as I know, and the only thing I can know about you is what is in me. So you talk and I hear the words, they are in my field of hearing. So you're in me. How much more intimate could it be? How much more inclusive could it be? And in what way could that be some kind of loneliness or deprivation? And yet I alone exist. But it's not. But the implication of that alone is not a smallness or a diminishment. It's a vast increase to infinity. You know, if I see a galaxy that is, X thousands of light years away, it's in me. I am there. There is no there other than me, than my isness and my being. This isn't sophistry. It's literally, if you look at your experiential field, you'll see it's the case. How could you be experiencing me talking now if the words weren't in your experiential field? Right? And can you know anything about me other than what's in your experiential field? How could you? I mean, surely not. You can't know if there's a limit to that. So how much? Suppose you could, sense my thoughts psychically. Even if you did that, and I would say, in fact, you are, that's still within your experiential field. So that just adds to the richness of the engagement. So aloneness. The implication of aloneness, when you're used to identifying yourself as a separate, body system that exists in a limited spatial context and so on and so forth, the implication of aloneness is somehow everything else is cut off or removed or erased or cancelled out, and all of a sudden you're drawn in. So it's a diminishment. But the aloneness that you actually are is not the aloneness that you actually are. It's an inclusive openness that includes the totality of reality. Because anything that actually exists does so because it exists within your experiential field. Because your experiential field is the only thing that exists as far as you can tell. So if China exists, it exists because it's in your experiential field. If the Andromeda Galaxy exists, it exists because it's in your experiential field. Right? So how can that be lonely?
So there's this belief abstraction that crops up, and because of that there's this sort of sense of tightness or closing down and a sense of separation. And
sure. Yeah. But you can see that. You see it, and it's an abstraction, and you're reacting to the abstraction, and isn't that an interesting phenomenon? But look at the context that's taking place in. That's taking place in the context of the rest of your experience, which is not closing down. Like you go to, say you go to a movie that's a tearjerker, and you get a little weepy. And it's a movie, for God's sakes, There's no one, suffering any difficulties whatsoever. They're rich actors that are, all laughing and happy and screwing each other or whatever. But it's, oh my God, so you're getting a little weepy. So you're being jerked around by essentially deliberately indulged in belief system. You suspend disbelief when you go to a movie sufficiently so it can titillate, right? It can push you around, your emotions and you might tighten up, oh my God, the heroine's being threatened, and you sort of tighten up like fight or flight and all. So all this kind of stuff happens. But at the same time that that's happening, the air is on your face. You feel that the seat under your butt. All those things are happening, and they aren't negated. They aren't canceled out by these mechanisms that are apparently present, that are apparently being manipulated into existence. So again, those are small subsystems in a vast context, and the context is not erased or negated by the focus, by the subsystem. All aspects of personality is the same way. So all your personality and your neuroses and your the way you've been screwed over by things and errors of outrageous fortune and all that stuff. All that is there, right? But it's a small subsystem in a vast continuum, most of which is beyond it, and the rest of it is not impacted by that. Or another example, take the Earth. So the Earth, with humans and the global warming, and is in arguably dire straits, and humans could, suppose there's World War III tomorrow and they exterminate all life on Earth. You think it affects the galaxy? Minusculely? You think the rest of the solar system even gives a shit about that? Because it's just a tiny little localized event. And likewise, if you look at your experiential field, The psychological events are a tiny little localized subsystem in a vast continuum, most of which has nothing to do with that, and they don't step on each other. They don't get in each other's way. I mean, look for yourself and see if that's true. I mean, this is an important point in experience, that a point of focus doesn't negate the context, and the context always comes with, always. And anything whatsoever that you're focusing on is a point of focus, including the totality of your personality. I can say, God, I'm such a mess. My life, I'm such a fuck up. My life is a disaster. I was screwed over as a kid, and I'm semi-functional, and this, that, and the other. Okay, cool, great. Given all that, suppose all that's even actually true, which is a big leap. Is that what else is going on? And the list of what else is going on is so much vastly bigger than the list of what is included in that is to be laughable.
And yet there is this determination and conditioning.
Sure, absolutely. Nothing is negated, nothing is cancelled out. But when you see what the context is, you see what any particularity actually is, which will always turn out to be vastly other than you thought it to be in the first place.
And determination and conditioning, it's just like a point of focus.
Of course. It doesn't actually exist.
And so
you exist. The phenomena. You could say. Let's see. One hypothesis that's perhaps a little more accurate, although again completely untrue because it's a hypothesis, is that you exist within an infinite karmic field, which consists of the actual energy states of every energy condition that exists within the experiential field, all of which interacts, let's say, and of which a very small subset is, your history and your psychology and all of that, your personality, with all of it, warts and all, etc. But if you look at that whole system, it's a vast system, and the particularity that you're defining as your personality is small.
Question, and then that system that you talk about, that's still within my experience, right?
Of course. The only actual system, and it's all argument, the only actual system, the only actual system is your field of experience itself.
Yeah. So maybe like thinking of the nuclear event that wipes out mankind.
Yeah.
Could be somewhat equivalent to like when I die, right?
No. No, because
my body dies. That's still going to.
Well, you could say it's equivalent, but I don't see much point in that. If a nuclear war happens, suppose an atom bomb fell right now, outside this door, it would be happening within your experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like you're dreaming, and the dragon's chasing you, and it's just about to bite your head off, and it catches you up and bites your head off.
Yeah.
But it's just in a dream. Who cares?
But it just goes sort of far out. To think of the galaxy.
Well, of course it is. But where else it is?
But,
Where else have you ever found a galaxy?
Exactly.
Galaxies are aspects of your experiential field. Or in my case, aspects of my experiential field.
Well, I don't know. Maybe in a Star Wars DVD or something.
Yeah, but that's an aspect of your experiential field too.
Okay.
George Lucas exists because of you.
You should pay me.
If only, yeah.
Peter, if the human race was wiped out as far as an observer knows, what do you have any? It's a speculative question. What type of observer is necessary to see something like their own planet or their own galaxy? Is there some criteria for being?
You already see it. There's only one observer.
It's going to be a non-human observer. The entire race is extinct.
But you're a non-human observer.
I'm a non-human observer?
Of course. You're a non-human observer that is observing, among other things, a human being called Dana that it is apparently incarnated in. accent on the word apparently.
What is the very basic quality of being an observer? Seems the ability to
The existence of experience.
Right.
And
So-
since if you exist, we're assuming for the sake of argument, your experience exists, which means that an observer exists, which means that's what you actually are as an observer. And everything that seems to exist is merely an apparition within your experience. It comes and goes. Every time you go to sleep, then it disappears.
Is my only option to hypothesize that other observers exist because I have no actual experience of other observers? I just have.
What do you mean your only option? You can do that or
I
not as
don't
you
think,
choose.
these things over here aren't necessarily observers. They are just something I'm observing.
Of course.
Yeah.
You can hypothesize that too.
Yeah.
But anything you do is a hypothesis. Either that they exist as a hypothesis, and that they don't exist is equally a hypothesis. It's just a question mark in actuality.
Yeah, so actually I'll never know if the human race is wiped out because all I'll know is that there's no more experience, or at least no more visual experience if something happens along.
Experience never ends. There's nothing but experience. Experience is reality. Experience is being. Human experience may end. When you die, your human experience, as Dana, may cease. But experience doesn't cease. You'll find that out. That's just an assertion at this point.
Oh, you mean like you feel like the experience, something from this ability to experience that I have now is going to continue infinitely into
Absolutely.
the future?
Well, yeah, but there's no future. You
No.
project the future
There's
for
no-
your
yeah,
convenience
there's
when
no-
you
yeah.
when you're awake.
Yeah.
You go to sleep and the future, time disappears, the future disappears. You start dreaming there's a new time and a new future and a new past for
So
that
all
matter.
there is really is a present and anything.
Yeah, you could say that. And the present is a euphemism for experience,
Yeah.
which is being. Experience is beyond space and time. It literally has no time. I mean, right now your experience is just you here, like it's always been. Has it ever been any different? Has it changed one iota? It's just you here.
Yeah.
I can't remember before I was born. So screw it. I can't remember yesterday. I can just have a fantasy of remembering yesterday. But it's still just me here, and it's the sameness of me-ness, here-ness that it's always been, and always will be. But that's just a lot of theorizing, so it's unimportant. You don't need to hold that as true or not true, because it's just bullshit. But look at what is true, which is this actuality that is manifest.
When you say beyond space and time, you mean those are abstractions?
Yes. Those are space and time are modes of experience. Experience is not a mode of space and time. Space and time exist because experience exists. It's not the other way around. Is that a hand up, or are you just being comfortable?
Comment about that. I was watching a movie the other day, and they were talking about the Aboriginals in Australia, and they said they don't have calendars, so their experience was not to have dates, I guess. So,
I'm sorry, it was a hand
It
up?
was.
Oh, okay, cool, sorry.
So once I'm just kind of curious because now knowing, or once you know or realize that everything is experience, what do you do with that knowledge? Do you just go
We'll
and
see.
smile? Or?
We'll see.
Okay.
You do whatever you do, and how relevant is doing with that knowledge anyway?
Sure.
So you're just basically telling us to stay in the present moment? I mean,
You don't need to stay in the present moment. Try and get out of the present moment.
I can get out of the present moment
You can,
by
eh?
thinking.
Well, you can pretend to get out of the present
Well,
moment, but you do it in the present moment. I'm going out of the present moment.
Well,
I'm out of the present moment now.
What I'm saying, if you're looking at something but thinking about something else as opposed to actually looking
But
at
all that happens in the present moment, and that's fine. So yeah, you look at things, you can get distracted as you want, but it's all just modes of the present. You don't need to distinguish between some present and some non-present, and then try to cling to some presentness, because what exists doesn't need to be clinged to. It doesn't need to be preserved. It's invulnerable. It's absolutely inviolable. God does not need protection. God does not need to be. God is not delicate. God is invulnerable. And what you actually are, what this actually is what that word refers to. So it's doing everything. It's not susceptible. It's not susceptible to anything. You don't need to pussyfoot around trying to be nice to reality, because you'll damage it.
Hurt its feelings. What about the tree in the forest?
Well, look for yourself. If you're thinking about a tree and forest, there's a thought of it. If there's an actual forest and an actual tree, then there's that.
And if I see it fall, it actually fell.
Suppose
if it
suppose-
fell and I didn't see it,
suppose
then
there's
I'm
a-
making a hypothesis.
Suppose
about that.
there's a not the tree we're talking about right now, but suppose somewhere else there's some tree and some forest that will never be talked about, that you will never see, that you will never think about, that you will never come upon in your experience whatsoever, and doesn't even exist, because we're not talking about that tree. We're talking about it's a thought. We're talking about some other tree that might exist that we're not talking about. It doesn't even exist as a thought. So does it fall? What does fall mean? What does it mean? It has to have some existence to have some actuality, and existence is a euphemism for experiential presence. And it's only experientially present as what it actually is. So the thought of it is present as a thought. You know, the narrative of it verbally is present as sound waves and so on, maybe in conjunction with thoughts. You know, so on. The visual fantasy of it is, you know, so on and so forth. So you can sort of catalog exactly the different dimensional aspects of any experiential actuality. And if you see an actual tree that you could like go up and touch and trip over and stuff, then that's present too, in that way.
Because inside of one of the bathrooms is this picture of the Earth from space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have never been in space, and I've never seen the Earth that way.
Right.
And it seems to me that there was a time before they took that picture that I didn't know that the people that are on the planet didn't know the shape of all the continents.
Right.
They just knew their own experience.
True. And now that picture exists within your experience.
Right. But I don't know it to be truly true.
Of course not.
I mean, it's a nice drawing.
It's a perspective. Everything's a perspective. You could take exactly that same picture with you know, some kind of an electron microscope or something that sees the atoms or something, and it looks completely different. It's still the Earth.
But that's the fantasy, isn't it?
Which is the
I
fantasy?
believe that Earth looks like that from that
Oh yeah,
picture.
all of that's fantasy.
When I've never seen
That
it
is
that
Earth.
way.
All it is an image in your visual field. And even that your visual field is a visual field is a fantasy. It's a heavy-handed qualification of experience, which is essentially unqualifiable.
You just lost me.
It's not important. Yeah, no, it's a total fantasy. Earth, it's patterns of light that you're seeing. If you happen to be seeing it, at the moment it's patterns of light you're thinking about, I suppose.
Well, my experiential field right now is very real to me.
It's absolutely real.
Totally.
It couldn't
That's
be
the
real.
only real thing I got. Really.
That's it. That is reality.
You know. And
Always.
I could turn on the radio. I mean, it's the War of the Worlds,
Sure.
basically.
Yeah.
You know, I could turn on a radio and they could have another War of the Worlds kind of experience
Sure.
and say that China just, you know, a nuclear bomb just hit China. It didn't really affect me.
Sure.
But I could believe
How much
that
do you-
fantasy.
How much do you suppose is happening right now that you'll never hear about? How real is
It
it?
is infinitely a lot of stuff.
So just because you're hearing about something doesn't make it any more or less important, any more or less real.
It could be real or it could not be real.
Yeah, depending upon if it ever shows up
As
as
part of
implication in terms of your experience. But if it's not in experience, it's nothing.
Because, you know, like they had the nuclear disaster in Japan a few years back.
Right.
Okay. And if if I started to get, cancer or radiation poisoning
Right.
now,
Right.
then it's much more real to me.
Yeah. If it was due to that, which you can't know, but you can hypothesize it. But let's suppose that actually happened, and let's suppose you got cancer that was actually due to that, then that's the way that reality is showing up in your
Right.
experience. Now but if you're not getting cancer from it, now it's showing up as news images or whatever in your memory or imagination, and or whatever. It shows up as however it's showing up. And the way it's showing up isn't actually the way it's showing up, it's just the way you're qualifying or classifying how it's showing up.
It's my filter.
Yeah. So your narration of it, your interpretation of it, is a very, very heavy-handed filtering of the actual experiential event, so to speak.
I have a question.
Sure.
You want to try
I would love some, thank you. How sweet of you to offer. If you could give it a dollop more sugar, that would be much appreciated. Thanks. Just like 3/4 of a cup would be great. Thanks so much, Larry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So my experience with all of this, it keeps suggesting to me paradox and how
Yes.
if I look at experience, the actuality of experience, it's clearly uncharacterizable.
Yes.
There's no way to definitively frame it. But what seems so extraordinary is that we still have this capacity, the intelligence of life has this capacity to very, I'm not going to say precisely, because the precision is questionable, but I have a capacity to describe aspects of the experiential field.
Yeah.
That in all of its distinctness and different qualities and characteristics with language, and seemingly we can, as human beings, understand each other.
Thanks so much.
At some level, if I start speaking to you about the sense of wide open, spacious clarity, I'm using descriptors like that to characterize something. It's not, you don't think that I'm talking about like World War III or nuclear bomb. You have some other understanding about what I'm describing, even if what I'm describing can't really be described.
Sure. Nothing can really be described, so that doesn't actually get in our way, of course.
Right.
But no, exactly. It's
That's
very
amazing. It's amazing to me that we, and maybe not just some horrible, accident, that the intelligence has created this unbelievable capacity to characterize experience.
Yeah.
At the same time, maybe it's some along the way of maturation turns around and recognizes that it can't actually do that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's this is intrinsically, infinitely paradoxical. Its apparent properties and its apparent function, what appears to be functionalities, are not coherent with each other. They contradict each other. It's like nothing is definable, but anything is definable. Kind of, and communication can't happen. Yet communication can happen with absolute intimacy. I mean, all of
But the paradoxes don't seem contradictory in direct experience.
No, because again, that's
They
just
don't
the
even seem contradictory.
no, because that's the fact. It's objectively true that is the case. That all of these apparently degree, at least by degrees of contradictory, if not absolutely contradictory. Properties coexist, their functionalities coexist. It's endlessly strange. This is that's really, the flavor of what one discovers in this investigation is how fucking weird this is. What's going on here is so inconceivably bizarre. It's so far beyond any description that could be made of it, And yet, it doesn't necessarily contradict any of those descriptions. It actually kind of includes them. It's like, okay, sure, it's that too.
Do you think that the censoring that you were describing, where whatever the attention or intelligence narrows its kind of range of what it's taking in and what it's trying to make sense of is that it would somehow be overwhelming at some level if, I mean, that's not my experience of it being, somehow it just gets richer rather than overwhelming. But what function is that, all that censoring playing? I mean, how has that come about?
Well,
that's what we're seeing.
One can't define that. All one can do is observe that as humans we have a strong ability and proclivity to engage in this mode of being with reality, even as we are simultaneously within reality and other modes at the same time. But, I think that one sort of a pop psychological way of parsing all of this is the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is that portion of the consciousness, whatever, and very loosely speaking, that deals with descriptions and narratives and linearities and drawing distinctions between this and that. And the unconscious mind deals with continuums and fields and spectra and the very nonlinear aspects of experience, and they coexist. And the fallacy that without this censoring, all of that weirdness would be overwhelming is the fallacy of the conscious mind pretending that it needs to deal with things the way the unconscious mind does. And it would be overwhelmed. It would go nuts. But it doesn't need to. That's the unconscious mind's job, and it's already doing it. You're already.
If we wanted resolution, I guess. Right?
Yeah, but that's the conscious mind's mode. Its arrogance is, I got to make sense of this. I got to come up with. I got to describe this. I got to own it. I got to narrate it, and which it does, skillfully within its range, right? But of course, most of reality is actually beyond that. But there's no contradiction because these different modes coexist. And in actual fact, you're already doing both of them. You're already fully engaged with the irrational, but the part of you that's engaged with it is the irrational part of you that can't particularly talk. So the part of you that's talking is the conscious mind, and it can speculate. The conscious mind can speculate, oh boy, I bet it would be really overwhelming if there wasn't this censorship and narration and having these nice linear events that I can get a handle on. If it was just all this, wah! I mean, imagine what experience is like for a newborn that's like 2 minutes old. I mean, how much narration do you think they have? How much sense do you think they're making of anything? It's just wah! Right? And that's happening right now. That never stopped. So this overlay of the conscious mind narrative ability and discriminating and creating these very simplified stick figure versions of what's going on that it then makes its domain, and it just relates to totally. From its point of view it is. But that has always coexisted with the unconscious mind, the presence of just the full field, which has never gone anywhere. And in actual fact, the portion of you that has always been engaged with it has never gone anywhere. The newborn consciousness that is clueless is right here, right? But it's not particularly articulate because it doesn't have the faculty of describing itself verbally. But then you look at an artist or something, or look at a lot of the irrational aspects of behavior and body language and things like that, and you find all of these expressions in actual fact are quite manifest. But they're very non-linear and undescribable and non-verbal and not distinguishable as a narration or as a description of this and that, naturally. And it's extremely paradoxical that these ultimately, divergent and contradictory modes coexist. But hey, there you go. No one said this had to make sense.
Yeah, certainly.
Other than the conscious mind. Conscious mind would like it to make sense.
Is that the basic point then of this discussion, that it doesn't make sense? You
sure.
Don't try to figure it out?
Yeah, sure. That's a good way to put it. It's a nice, simple...
Well, you said something interesting to that lady. You said something to her about existing infinitely, but isn't that your experience? I mean, how do you know that?
Huh?
You said something to this lady about that we would exist infinitely. But isn't that a product of your experience to say that?
Well, it's not a product of my experience. It's what my experience is. With experience, space and time exist within consciousness. Consciousness doesn't exist within space and time. So consciousness isn't a byproduct of things that are happening in space and time. Empirically, I mean, look for yourself and see if that's okay. And I'm not saying it's like that, so that's how it is, and you should, take my word for it. I'm inviting an investigation, an inquiry that, the fundamental point I'm trying to make is that your experience is right here, right now. Mm-hmm. It is inconceivably bizarre and wonderful, and has inconceivably amazing and astounding implications. And you're free to explore that as much as you want, if you're drawn to it. And if you aren't, if you don't, there's no harm, no foul, because you're not actually gaining anything by doing it. Because you already are it; it's already happening. But some people are drawn to this kind of, investigation.
Well, what you were saying a moment ago about the unconscious working and processing things.
Uh-huh.
Can one, another way of saying that could one talk about thinking of the body or thinking through the body, or because I think about like gesture, and
sure,
there's a sort of
there's all sorts of euphemisms that we use that is used consciously to refer to relatively unconscious process, feeling, various things. But yeah, like you said, that kind of thing. But the important point is that it's already fully happening, and it's not that one needs to learn how to do that. You just notice that it is the case. You're already a total expert in unconscious functioning, but you are unconsciously. So your conscious mind may not have access to that, or may not, depending upon your particular talent range and intelligence and so on and so forth.
Is there a way of a conscious mind disrupting that unconscious working?
No. I mean, it's all a gestalt, of course. But nothing disrupts anything. The way, and this again is an assertion I invite you to investigate for yourself. The way, there's no cause and effect. Everything happens in the instant. So everything is, the holistic presence of all conditions exactly as they are occurs in the instant of their occurrence. And there's no subsequent interaction with subsequent things or subsystems with other subsystems. The whole thing appears instantaneously exactly the way it is in that instant. So it's like, you can imagine the frames of a movie if you want. This is very heavy-handed and completely inaccurate, but it's a simple way to visualize something like this. Imagine a frame of a movie where you have, say, the bad guy's punching the hero in the face, and the hero's face goes, So you're watching it on the screen, it's just like, right? It takes a second or whatever. But suppose you looked at that frame by frame. You get this, and this, and this, and finally this. And so when you watch the movie, you think, oh, his hand hit his face and pushed it. But when you look, you see the face wasn't pushed. It was the frame that put it there like that. So it's the presence of the frame in the instant that projected it that way. So there's apparent cause and effect. So, if I knocked my glass of water over, then it would fall and the water would spill. And I could say, oh, my hand caused the water to spill. But in actuality, what's causing my hand to move and what's causing the water to spill is one and the same thing. It's the being of the present moment. So there's no actual interaction between my hand and the glass. It's just an apparent interaction because they're juxtaposed. And what's put in them there as juxtaposed is real-time creation, which is what we call experience.
Well, I don't know. It seems like, like in the present moment, there's a certain discomfort that I feel, a certain confusion,
sure,
right? And it seems like, I guess I just surmise it. It seems like there would be a way where my system would be more integrated with itself, where
Wouldn't that be nice?
where I would feel more ease, and I could
That
push
might
it
happen.
more easily. And
That might happen. But if that happens, it'll be essentially miraculous. But everything that happens is essentially miraculous, so there's no surprise there. Look, it looks like we're communicating, right? You're saying something and I'm saying something, and we're hearing each other, and then thoughts are occurring about what the other one said, and then like sort of this little sort of dance of thoughts, and then responses emerge, and so there's this sort of dance of apparent cause and effect and intense interaction, right? But in each instant, when you think a thought, it's being put in your consciousness by the same thing that puts everything in your consciousness, to see the what I call the radiance, which is the very nature of reality to generate appearance. So that thought appears in that instant, and it appears because the radiance is putting it there. It didn't appear because of anything I said. So coincidentally, it appears to be this incredibly detailed causal interaction and response and responsiveness and all of that, cause and effect and so on. But each of those events is being put as a whole into presence in real time by that which puts everything in presence in real time. I mean, I could say that picture on the wall is there because someone hung it there, but in actual fact, that picture's on the wall because it is there now. And what's putting it there now is a mysterious potency, which is the same as putting the light in what's putting the light in my consciousness. Suppose I went to sleep, right, and I started dreaming, and all of a sudden I was in a room. Suppose it was a room with a bunch of bizarre spiritual pictures on the wall and lights and stuff, and I dreamed I was talking to a bunch of people, right? What's putting the light there? What's putting the pictures that are on the wall in that room? I can say, oh, I can in the dream I can say, well, yeah, someone hung that picture there, and that's why it's there. But in actual fact, it's being put there by the real-time dreaming potency in the moment. No one hung it on the wall. There's no wall. It's appearing. That picture's appearing. That's all I can say about it. It's appearing. You have a thought, it's appearing. That's all you can say about it. Oh no, it's part of a complex discussion we had. These things, and I'm thinking about what was said, and I'm reacting. It's all just gobbledygook. It's all narration.
Peter, the dream analogy maybe that might not be exactly analogous, because in the waking state, things are said to have a relative interdependent existence. In the dream,
they may have a relative interdependent existence, but that's a euphemism for an imaginary interdependent existence, because there's no things to have an interdependence.
I can understand that in a dream statement, in the so-called waking.
Waking state is not different. What makes things exist in a waking state? Where did emptiness go? Where did sunyata go? How do you get things?
Because in the dream, it's purely the imaginary world of the subject.
As opposed to this, which is what?
Which is said to be an interdependent matrix, or...
Said to be. How do you know it's said to be? Where was it said to be?
In my dream, if I dream of Peter Braun,
right.
And
how do you know you're not dreaming now? Let me ask you that. How do you know for absolute certain that you're not having an incredibly vivid dream? Suppose this is not a dream. Suppose this is the waking state and we're talking, and you go home and you sleep tonight, and suppose you dream about talking to me. How can you know whether you're dreaming or not? I mean, conclusively. How can you know? I'm not saying you are or you aren't. I'm just saying, how can you know?
May I respond to that? I mean...
Sure.
Okay. When I'm dreaming, sometimes when I'm dreaming, I think I'm actually experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't realize I'm dreaming. But when I'm experiencing something,
right,
I know I'm not dreaming. Because I'm awake.
How do you know you're awake?
Because I'm talking to you, because I have my eyes open.
You don't have the eyes open in a dream? You don't talk to people in a dream?
But it's all up here.
Well, how do you know that? When you're dreaming, you don't know it's all up here. What does up here mean?
Well, that's what I'm saying. When I'm dreaming, I don't know whether I'm in dreaming or not. Sometimes
right.
I think I'm actually experiencing it.
Sure. Well,
I'm telling you flat out, I'm awake right now. I'm not dreaming. I mean,
Well, that's great.
okay, yeah.
Suppose you're actually dreaming, and
But
you're
I'm
dreaming
not,
that you're
and I
telling
know
me that you're
no,
awake.
You're hypothesizing something that's absurd. I'm sorry. I know
Okay,
I'm wide
it's
awake.
absurd.
Huh?
It's absurd. I'm with you there.
Okay.
This could all be a dream, is what you're saying.
How would you know?
You can't.
A really sharp, really lucid, precise dream.
Okay.
Best
so
one I've ever had, actually, so far.
Well, that's what
You once said to me, which I can never forget, you said, how do you know you're not dead?
Sure.
And I said,
How do you know this isn't the afterlife?
because I didn't have the before.
Just not remembering it is a pretty shoddy
Excuse
proof.
for not having it, right? Yeah, it could be that I'm dead and I'm dreaming.
It's like saying I didn't live in the previous life because I don't remember it. Maybe you just don't remember it.
Just bad memory.
Yeah. So if you lived in the previous life, then this is the afterlife.
Right. And if I die and have something else, then this is the before life.
Hmm? But all
But it's
that's all
hanging
those are just hypotheses. They're just concepts. But this that is here is not a concept. This that is here is not a hypothesis.
But I know I'm not dreaming because I'm awake is an assertion, unfortunately, based on a fantasy, correct?
Of course.
It's hard on the ego.
Maybe. Any certainty has to be imagined into existence, because the very nature of actuality is that it's just intrinsically uncertain.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's a sure thing.
they woke up. Were you guys dreaming?
Hey, Peter, so what about those moments in which there's gaps or brain farts or confusion or like the paradoxes where it does seem like there's a shutdown of a certain function and then there's maybe the possibility of seeing something else or seeing more directly.
Sure, anything can happen, but that it's something else and that it's more or less directly is imaginary, is a hypothesis. The reality always looks like something in the instant. Even if it looks like nothing, suppose you're on very, very heavy general anesthesia. Suppose you're going to have open heart surgery, and you're just you're just gone. They've dosed you to the gills, and you're just like not there. And yet, in actuality, the not there-ness is what your experience is appearing as. Even that is an appearance. So, dizziness. Suppose you get really drunk and you just are totally foolish and you pass out. That's not a loss of something. That's just what reality happens to look like at that moment.
But there is like the normal functioning of people is just it's fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's sometimes where that stops for a moment.
No, it always changes. It's never normal. It's never the same way twice. Every instant you're experiencing in a way you've never experienced before. And so qualifying as normal or not normal is compared to what? The exact ratio of exactly how clear you are, exactly how confused you are, exactly how distracted you are, exactly how focused you are, is a continual fluctuation that never exactly repeats. Right? So what's normal?
There's a more or less diluted, right?
Huh?
Like I can be certain about my belief system as being reflected back to me as...
Well, certainty means delusion. But not really. Certainty just means the presence of uncertain experience, which is presenting as if it was certainty. That's why it has to be defended. You ever noticed how fundamentalists are people that are really, buy very heavily into a belief?
Yes.
They aren't just comfortable with it and like, okay, so they have to defend it. It's like it's precarious because they know that it's not really certain, and they know that they're having to uphold it.
So when I go home and call my girlfriend in Texas and tell her I'd like to see this chocolate,
Mm-hmm.
and she says to me, "What was it about?"
Mm-hmm.
How would you recommend I respond to that question?
Well, how would you respond to it right now without my recommendation?
There's not much to say, really.
Well, that's fair enough.
I don't know. I guess, again, it's my filtering, but I guess I was expecting something a lot different.
Oh,
You know, I don't know what I was expecting, but you know.
Well, what I would say I'm trying to talk about,
Uh-huh.
and this is a very heavily filtered spin doctrine.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't trying to be a wise ass.
No,
I really,
I hear you.
When I walk out of here, it's like, what happened when I was in there? You know, and I can't put it into words. Is what I'm saying to you. So
But that's a good thing. I mean, what I'm talking about, what I would say I'm talking about, which is of course totally partial and absurd and spin doctrine to his listeners, is that it's possible to notice how your experience is actually a lot weirder and more ungraspable than we're used to holding it as being, and that when we talk about when we think things are a certain way, we are doing heavy-handed partializing of experience, much of which, if not most of which, is way vastly beyond what we're partializing. And it's possible to notice that very directly for oneself, and that can have very interesting implications, and be entertaining and so on and so forth, as well as arguably liberating and fun and so on, whatever. Supply your own adjective.
Until they lock us up.
Yeah. Well, that could happen anyway. You get locked up whether or not you're exploring this shit.
Wrongfully accused.
I feel like I care a little more about people who seem to have a non-ordinary experience. I mean, this is a hypothesis that there are people and I can know something about their experience, like, mad artists. Or I went to Santa Fe, they had an outsider art exhibition, and people in mental hospitals and other people with various ways of altering their perceptions.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of cool that there's a certain kind of a lot of variety.
Yeah, totally.
Seemingly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, humans, the variety in humans is inconceivably vast,
Right.
and any apparent lack of variety is being adamantly spin doctored and insisted on in the face of the fact that it doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, right.
Everyone's a one-off. Everyone's unique. Everyone's completely deviant from everyone else. And most people are very busy denying that. Most people are very busy saying, "No, but I'm normal. I'm just like everyone else. Look, all these people, these are my people." But we don't like them. They're not our people.
You say
And they're all the same.
in general that there's less truth whenever somebody tries to prop up a theory. Like that's a sign
Well,
of an untruth.
It's not untruth. It's just a partial.
Yeah, like everything else.
Yeah, anything that can be specified is a partiality
Right.
because it omits anything that's not being specified. Wow. Must have got lucky. It's the trying.
Yeah. It's try talking.
It's the trying. Always.
Worth coming in.
It's all anybody ever does.
Well, that's even
Using language.
yeah. When people are doing that, that's not all they're doing. And even if they think that's all they're doing,
yeah, they're
doing everything else at the same time, most of which is completely beyond that.
Yeah, they're doing an energy thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
We believe our own bullshit.
Yeah. Typically, but you don't have to.
I wanted to ask about another paradox. How you be looking at direct experience again and seeing that the present perception is just completely, it's even beyond ungraspable because it's like, as you would say, it's vanishing as it's appearing. So, given that reality, of direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
How is knowledge possible? How is it that we would appear that there's a tangibility to things enough so that we've come up with names to describe apparent patterns of experiencing? And
But
yet, how is anything seemingly holding together given the fact that it's falling away as it's appearing? And that's literally what it feels like.
It's a miracle.
It's like a
It's
magic
the nearest
show.
I can come. It's a miracle. It's a magic show. It's a miracle.
That's what it seems like. And I don't know.
Nothing has any coherence, and everything has total coherence.
Is it
Try and
memory
make
that's
sense of
creating?
that.
Is it memory that's creating that coherence?
Well, maybe yes, maybe no. But what's creating memory? I mean, just throwing a name at it isn't an explanation.
No.
Anyway, it's about quitting time. Thank you all very much for joining me. It's been lovely chatting with you. I hope you've had at least amusement, if not provocation.
I just want to remind people that
Oh yes.
to go to Peter's website, opendoorway.org, and it lists there's a retreat coming up in November. It's a 4-day retreat in Joshua Tree.
Oh, that's going to be a big fun. Anyone who's
There's also a
interested.
retreat,
I'm not staying in the
not
desert.
residential,
We
but
party.
in LA,
We party
but-
seriously.
Yeah, and more importantly, he also has two video conferences.
Yeah, every month there's usually 3 video conferences that are
And
free to
there's
attend.
information there on what dates.
You're welcome to drop in online, and we, you're seeing everyone's face on the screen, and we talk bullshit to each other and stuff. Big fun. Big fun if you have a low threshold of entertainment, or if you're a total nerd like some of us, like some of me.
Oh, what's the next?